There's my tattoo. Looks like it's working. Okay. Hello, and welcome to Dad Hair Day. This is the podcast that I've just created. I'm your host. I'm Matt Fugit, and basically I wanted to create a little space where I could sit back and talk to you guys all about hair, talk to you about what my what my approach on being a dad is and has been, and just basically rant, tell you some of my fun experiences of being behind the chair, some of my experiences now being in front of a high chair, and hopefully you guys can, with each episode, I'm hoping that you get some great hair tips, you get some fun stories of things that I have encountered along the way in my career, and and hopefully I can help a new dad out if that's a thing. I'm still very new to fatherhood. My daughter is 18 months old, 16 months old, 18 months old. I don't know. My wife will correct me. So that's neither here nor there. But anyway, so this is episode 1 and I have no idea what I'm doing, full transparency. I just thought that I would sit down and start talking and basically try to drop some knowledge and make you guys laugh and just have a good time doing it. So, like I said, I'm Matt Fugit. I'm living now in LA. I am a hairdresser. I've been doing hair for 20 years, for those of you that don't know me. So anyway, I thought we should just jump right into this episode. And ultimately, today I want to talk about blowouts. It's been one of my claims to fame. I was an expert blowout, sought after blowout person in New York when I was doing hair there. And so I thought that would be the best thing to just start right off with, kick it off with. Some tips on how to blow out your hair more effectively, as well as talk about blowouts in general. And I guess I should start at the beginning. And the original blowout that got me, that got my career trajectory going, actually had nothing to do with hair. It was when I was 18 years old, and I was a senior in high school. And I was driving my car to a graduation party, and I was driving a Mazda RX-7, which was the same car that Vin Diesel drove in The Fast and the Furious. And I was so cool, and I loved that car. And I actually credit that first Fast and the Furious movie to kind of why I became doing hair, and this is why. So I was going to a graduation party. I had my girlfriend in the passenger seat with me, and it was a very, very, very fast car. So it was a twin turbo car. And I had my first, basically I was just being arrogant and I was racing, and I was driving at like 150 miles an hour next to a motorcycle, and I didn't see an oncoming car coming. So I grew up in this little tiny town called Enumclaw, Washington. And so it's kind of like a farm town. It's 45 minutes outside of Seattle. And so I was on a kind of like a gravel road. I mean, it was a paved road, but loose gravel. And it was parallel to two big farms, two cow fields. So I lost control of my car and flipped out into this car field. I flipped out into a cow field pasture and should have probably died. I was 18. It was the day after my senior prom, and it should have probably killed me and my girlfriend, and it was a gift from God that I got a second chance at life. So when I was laying on a stretcher going to the hospital, I kind of had this weird epiphany that life was too short, and I wanted to do something totally, totally different with my life from that point forward. So my father owned a car dealership. He's a Ford dealer, still owns Fugit Ford in the town of Enumclaw where I grew up. And that was kind of my destiny. I was destined to become a car salesman. But that day I decided to take a different route. And my girlfriend was on the stretcher next to me, and her hair was still in her updo from prom the night before. And I just remember laying on that stretcher and kind of trying to figure out what I loved to do and what my strengths were and what my and just sort of where I loved to be. And that was when I decided that I loved making people happy. I loved working with my hands. I was an artist. I grew up painting, drawing my whole life. My dad was also an art major. And basically, I grew up playing the drums, And I wanted to kind of live a rock star lifestyle, and I wanted to be around a lot of women. I was also biggest flirt in high school, I guess. You know how they have the shit in the yearbook where it's like most likely to succeed or most likely to be president or whatever. Well, I was biggest flirt. Surprise, surprise. And so yeah, I decided let's add up all these things that I love to do. I love to like do things artistically with my hands. I love to rock and roll, and I wanted to flirt with girls. And it just happened to be that my cousin was a really amazing hairdresser, and she used to like do my hair. So at that time, for those of you that can't see my hair right now, it's actually a certain tone of gray. Yeah, I just did a weird collaboration with a brand to make my hair look like a Maltese. So yeah, the shit you do for your daughter. So anyway, I made my hair look like a Maltese. But anyway, in that day in high school, my hair was bright fucking orange. So I thought it was super cool. I was Backstreet's Back, all right. And my cousin Janae was my hairdresser. And you know, I just loved going into the hair salon. I thought it was a super cool place to hang out. All the dudes in there were so cool. And the energy was amazing. And I was sitting there and I went, you know what? Maybe I'll be a hairdresser. And so that first, like, I mean, it was more of a car accident than a blowout. But, you know, since we're on the topic of blowout, I figured I'd kind of tell you that's where my career started. Flipped my car and decided I wanted to be a hairdresser. So, yeah. So I will touch on my days in Seattle and all of that sort of stuff and doing hair in a very young part of my career in another episode. But let's fast forward to the actual time when I learned what a blowout was. So for you guys listening to this, a blowout is when a woman goes to the hair salon and they get their hair styled by the hairstylist. So where I came from, outside of Seattle, I didn't know what this was. I wasn't cool enough or like high end enough from where I was from to understand what the term blowout was. And I'll never forget my first day in New York City, coming into the hair salon, and I was an assistant, and I was working at this badass hair salon in the meatpacking district called Sally Hirschberger downtown. And I got the opportunity to be Sally's assistant. And Sally was one of the most rock and roll hairdressers, still is, of the moment. And so when I came into her salon, I was completely overwhelmed. I was completely out of my league. I had no idea what I was doing. I could sweep hair. That was about the only asset that I brought. So when I showed up, I was raw. I had no clue. And I remember looking at the schedule and it was like, so-and-so haircut, so-and-so haircut, so-and-so haircut, and so-and-so haircut, so-and-so haircut. But then there was so-and-so blowout. And I'll never forget asking one of the stylists there what this meant. I said, what does this mean, blowout, on the schedule? And she looked at me like I was from Mars. And she goes, she wants a blowout. And I'll never forget this, Jessica. She was like the cool girl from Brooklyn at the salon. She kind of gave me this look like, dude, where are you from? And she goes, it's a blowout. And I was like, what? I was like, so, I don't know. I was so new that I didn't really understand. So I was like, so someone comes to get their hair styled? And she goes, yeah. And I went, they don't style their hair themselves? ? And she rolled her eyes and says, and I'll never forget that, she goes, a lady does not style her own hair. And that was my big like, whoa, day 2, New York City. I have no idea what I'm doing. And, but I wanted to learn. So Jessica was also the one that I remember the same day. I think I went we were in the break room and I pulled open the fridge and I poured myself a glass of milk. And, you know, being from a farm town, I drank glasses of milk. That was just what I did. And I remember I poured myself a full glass of milk and chugged the whole thing. And it felt like, it felt like time stood still in that break room. And all of the stylists looked at me and they like stared. And Jess goes, did you just drink a full glass of milk? And I had no idea why that was such a bad thing. Still kind of to this day, don't understand why I couldn't just drink a full glass of milk. But nonetheless, I never drank a full glass of milk again in front of anyone in New York. I guess it was a weird thing to do. Anyway, so the blowout, for you girls listening, you obviously know what a blowout is. So I tried to become the best blowout person at the salon as I could, and so I learned as best I could. I learned how to use a blow dryer better. I learned how to use a round brush better, and I, as an assistant, that was kind of the next stepping stone. So I basically just was allowed to sweep hair, and then once I trained enough in like class night, I learned how to blow out hair, and then once I really started to manipulate hair, I got to blow out hair on clients. And normally how it worked was the stylist would blow out the front of your hair and the top, and then the assistant would blow out the back of the hair, because the back of the hair wasn't as crucial and it saved time. And we ran the salon very much like an assembly line. And so yeah, we would just knock them out. But I learned right away like how to manipulate and stretch and direct the heat onto the hair to make the cuticle seal down, and really learn how to use the elasticity and the tension, and use the round brush to pull and stretch and sculpt. And it really became an art. I started to learn how to turn hair from just a like a mathematical thing where I wasn't just drying hair anymore. I was actually styling hair, and there was this great like moment of like rite of passage for me when all of a sudden the hair that I was doing was no longer just dried, but it was styled. And that was the biggest thing in my early years in New York City, was we styled hair there. And I think most other places across the country and everything that I've gone and seen, a lot of the thought behind getting hair from wet to dry is just as fast as you can, as well as and not really paying attention to the subtle nuances that come with styling it. So yeah, and I think now as I look back, it was definitely one of those things that I cherished, and yeah. So I guess I could go. Let's give a couple tips real quick. So girls, when you're styling your hair at home, depending on your hair type and texture, it's really important that you know when to put product to your hair. So depending on if your hair is thick or thin, curly or straight, you should sort of know that if you have really, really thick curly hair, you know what kind of girl you are, and you usually are you can bend and break the rules a little bit. So you normally have to put the product in when your hair is pretty wet if you're trying to blow it out. But for you other girls that have more fine hair and that have that like more normal type of hair, I mean, who knows what normal is anymore, but the biggest thing that I've noticed is that most women put the product in their hair, when their hair is too wet, which then dilutes the product, and the product now no longer serves its purpose. So if you're trying to put a volumizing, spray in your hair and your hair is all wet, the water is going to dilute that volumizing spray down. You get no volume. If you're trying to put a, smoothing agent or some sort of blowout cream or serum or something like that, and your hair is just totally soaked and wet, you're no longer going to get the benefits of that product. So you need to sort of pre-dry your hair. You need to kind of know how and when to apply product to your hair. It all comes from time. It all comes from sort of practicing and playing. But if you can, play with that. First thing is try to figure out when you can apply product to your hair. That would be my first tip. Second tip is throw your wire brushes away. That was the biggest thing I learned, was wire brushes are absolutely the bane of my existence. A, because wire doesn't give, it doesn't bend, it doesn't have any flex to it. And B, it gets really, really hot. So if you can't control the temperature of your instruments, you end up burning things, and you end up causing a lot more damage to your hair than you would have, than you even have control over. So at least when you're working with a curling iron or a blow dryer, you can set temperature settings, right? You can set a temperature on your blow dryer, you can set a temperature on your curling iron. But when you are working with a wire brush, you don't really know how hot that brush is getting, especially when you're concentrating air from your blow dryer onto that brush. So I've always used boar bristle round brushes. I'm a huge fan of a boar bristle brush. I feel that boar bristle in itself makes your hair smoother. It seals the cuticle down, and it allows everything to be sealed and smooth and finished and polished, where wire brushes are trying to heat and they're trying to steam out the water from your hair, and they're basically a means to an end for faster drying, but it doesn't mean better drying. It's, I'll use an analogy a lot where it's the difference between microwaving and baking. So, you know, if you want to, you know, make macaroni and cheese, you can throw it in the microwave or you can put it in the oven and you're gonna get different results. So but with a wire brush, you're also, when you're working a wire brush down through your hair and you hit a snag, the wire is not going to bend and allow the snag to untangle. It's just gonna pull and tear through it. And when your hair is wet, it has so much more elasticity to it that it's going to pull and then just snap, or it's going to pull to a point where the elasticity is gonna become compromised and it's going to kind of, like when you take a Christmas ribbon and you hit it with a scissor and you make it all curly, right? It's going to do the same thing with your elasticity. So, you know, you want to be very careful with those type of brushes because they're going to cause a lot more tension. They're going to pull. They're going to mess up your hair texture. Where a boar bristle, the boar is going to bend, and when it hits that snag, the snag is usually going to either be detangled or it's going to just kind of like it's not going to, like the boar bristle will actually give and the snag will work its way out, if that makes sense. Yeah, so anyway, so throw away your wire brushes. It reminds me of Mommy Dearest. I used to watch this show called Mommy Dearest with my mother, and there was this scene with these wire hangers, and Mommy Dearest would be like, wire hangers? And she would go nuts on her daughter if her dresses were ever hung on wire hangers. And that's how I feel about wire brushes. So I've always wanted to do a video where I incorporated that scene from Mommy Dearest where she's screaming about wire hangers, and I want to like voice over it and do a wire brushing thing too. So the caveat to how hot you can get with wire brushes is basically the next part of when you're blowing out your hair, how important it is to let your hair cool. So when you are doing your own blowout at home, you basically want to make sure that you are allowing for your hair to cool off. And when you are stretching it, pulling it, shaping it with your brush and your blow dryer, you're trying to create memory in it, and you're trying to kind of like, you know, either make it curly or make it wavy or make it bone straight, but whatever you're trying to do, you're sculpting the hair so that it acts a certain way. So if you're trying to make it straight, or if you're trying to make it curly and you have it all hot and it's in this ribbon or it's in a, you know, curl of some kind or whatever you've manipulated it with your brush, you want to make sure that as it's cooling down, you're getting maximum longevity out of that style by either setting it, like, you know, you can like roll it up around your finger and clip it to your head with a little clip. What I used to do a lot of times is once I would finish a section, I would wrap the hair around the handle of my brush, because we had these like beautiful wooden handles, and you could ribbon the hair around the brush, and then I would pin it up and put a little clip in it and leave it in a little coil so that as it cooled down, it would lock in that curl. And that's how my blowouts started to last longer. So it went from, that would be the difference between a blowout that was very limp and a blowout that was absolutely beautiful and sort of stayed for days and days. And that's like, you know, I think a very important thing when you were doing hair in New York City. You had to make sure that your fucking blowouts lasted a long time or your clients would not come back. Also because a lot of the hair in New York City was so curly and they all wanted it straight and smooth that if you manipulated it in a certain way and it didn't stay, you know, they just wasted a lot of money on a blowout. And a lady that does not do her own hair had to make sure that her blowout was going to be beautiful for 4 days until she came back into the salon and got her hair blown out again. So anyway, that's one of my other favorite tips. Let me get a sip of water. Okay. So when I used to live in Brooklyn, oh my God. So guys, little tip, let's jump off to a different tangent for a quick second, because I just thought of a thing about a blowout that me and my wife had the other day. So we have a new baby, and when you have a new baby, you always get like, I feel that if you don't know, let me tell you now, there's going to be weird tension because the little baby does certain things that you can't control. And when you can't control things, the things that you can control can kind of overwhelm, I guess you could say. Okay, what am I trying to say? So anyway, me and my wife had a big argument. Not really an argument, but it's always this, there's certain things I think that you should do before you have a child, like a stepping stone, right? Like, and I think one of the greatest tools for child rearing is, no, it's not a dog. Yes, we did get 2 dogs before we had Phoenix, but honestly, I think the best thing for parenting is a Brita water filter. So hear me out. So Brita, I mean, I'm sure you all know what a Brita water filter is, and this is not a sponsored moment, but basically any kind of water filter. I think me and my wife fight more over the Brita water filter than anything else in the whole house. And I think it's really funny because for me, I like the Brita to always have cold water in it. My wife always likes the Brita to have full water in it, no matter what. So for like when I go to get water, I kind of always make sure that the Brita has enough water for whatever you need to do. And I also feel, this could be just really weird, that if I have my beautiful little Brita and it's half full of water, then that water should be drank before I kind of like dilute that beautiful cold water with like lukewarm water from the tap. Does that make sense? But my wife is always, but poor Laura, it always has to be full for some reason. I mean, the jug is ginormous. I mean, even if it's half full, you're gonna get 4 glasses of water out of it. But the amount of times where she opens the fridge and is like, the Brita's empty. And I'm like, the Brita's not empty. It's just half full. She's like, no, it's half empty. And I think it's a great life lesson in parenting on how each of you view your Brita water filter. And I think before you have a kid, you should both sit down and really have a clear dynamic conversation of what you're wanting from that Brita. And, you know, I think it will make parenting a lot easier because there's going to be a lot of things that come up in parenting where you're going to see things as perfectly fine and normal, where your wife may be like, that is complete acidine backwards nonsense. And most of the time she's right. I mean, I guess the Brita water filter should be filled all the time, but, you know, there's just times where I forget, man. Like, I'm human. I forget to fill the water filter up. I remember being in Brooklyn in my very my smallest apartment ever in New York City, way out in Bay Ridge, and I couldn't afford power, and I was living by a candle, and all I had was a candle and my Brita in Bay Ridge. And I remember writing jokes because I was like, you know what, I bet I could do an hour-long stand-up just about this fucking Brita water filter because it's worse than a pet. It's like, I feel like you got to feed it, you got to pull it out, you got to clean it. I mean, damn, it feels like you got to take the thing for a walk. Anyway, yeah, so dads, be ready for your wives when you have a brand new baby or when your loved one is pregnant or anything like that, that you're going to get into these conversations and these arguments that are so ass backwards. And again, it's like, it's going to become a blowout. Another term for blowout is, that you're going to have an argument and it could be over the stupidest things. And yeah, I just think it's a very random ass thing to talk about. But nonetheless, the Brita water filter has been the bane of my existence for a while, so I needed to say that out loud to you guys listening, that I need to keep that damn Brita water filter full. Even if it's just full of lukewarm water, but then I get mad because I like my cold water. But you know what? What can you do? Oh, dads, another term for blowouts. Girls, you probably know this already, but my sister had a beautiful boy that is a week older than my daughter. So when you have a baby, you start realizing that the little shit doesn't matter as much anymore. You have these massive fucking arguments about Brita water filters, but then there's other things that happen along the way that you just suck up and you just start dealing with. And of course, elephant in the room is changing diapers. So for all of you guys that have yet to change a diaper, here's some of my best tips. In 8th grade, I used to wrestle. It was the only year I ever wrestled. And when you wrestle, the most important thing about your opponent, and I say opponent meaning my baby daughter, Phoenix, she's my opponent when we're changing diapers, is you have to control the hips. It's the only thing I ever remember about wrestling. When you wrestled, if you could control the opponent's hips, you were always in control. And that definitely stands true when you are changing a diaper, because that baby is all over the place. So if you can't use misdirection, which is another amazing thing to do, if you can't like grab something and fucking jiggle it in front of her face while you're trying to change this diaper, you have to be able to like make sure she doesn't squirm or fall off the damn changing table or whatever. And also, you know, like when she has a blowout, which guys at home, this is what a blowout is. A blowout is when the baby shits so much that it comes out the diaper and it basically is like all over everything. So fortunately, Phoenix doesn't have a lot of blowouts, but my sister's son, Roland, is like the blowout king. I swear every single other day on our family chain, it's like another screenshot of Roland's blowout. And it's just the poor kid has just got a trumpet for an ass. But dads, so when you are changing diapers and you start dealing with all this shit that isn't your own, you really start realizing how much of like the stuff that goes on in your life just doesn't matter. And, you know, of course, seeing your wife give birth, that was like, I mean, that I'll have to go into a whole other, you know, I'll have Laura on an episode and we'll talk about that. And I'll talk about doing her hair every day that I did for a year, minus the day I did her hair, the day she gave birth and what the difference was. But anyway, yeah, so, I mean, the other day, I was giving Phoenix a bath, and, you know, my beautiful little precious little angel cherub child is sitting there in the bath with me, and I'm doing her hair, and I always like to like play with her little hair, and she doesn't have much of it yet, but soon she will, and I can give you guys all tips on how to style your daughter's hair, and I'm excited for that. But you know, she stands up and she kind of locks eyes with me and tilts her head to the side and gives me this look while she's standing there all butt naked in her little bath, and I'm like, wait a minute, she's shitting. She's gonna take a dump right now. So I have to figure out how I'm going to remedy this situation, or like, you know, figure out this mission impossible, you know, this like ticking time bomb of a fuse that's going across my mind right now. It's like boom, 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 boom. So of course, I grab toilet paper, as like one does, and I try to figure out how to get around the back of her while she kind of like stands and squats and does this little like poop right into my hand where I'm holding this toilet paper. And it was just one of those moments where you're like, wow, life is full of little pit stops, man. I did not realize that I would be catching shit from my daughter's ass just like right into my hand. But that's what you call, you know, fatherhood. So guys, get ready for that. You know, there's gonna be a lot of shit thrown at you that you're not going to be ready for. And how did I get from a hair conversation to this? Wow, this is going to be an interesting podcast. Buckle up, guys. Buckle up. This is where we're going with this. Okay. So I digress back from shit to hand into how you should section your hair for a blowout. Yeah, okay. So girls at home, when you when you section your hair, you should be very mindful of oh man, of how you section it. So I would say, okay, another blowout tip for your hair, not for your daughter's butt section, is style your calyx first. Guys, the calyx, you know, like your little parts around your hair. And girls, style the parts around your hairline first, because those are the ones that you need to last the longest. Everything around your hairline, make sure you style that stuff all first, because you don't want it drying kinked or curly or clipped or anything like that. So throw your product on that, style your hairline right away, and and yeah, so then also, because the hairline section, for those of you that don't know, when you're washing your face at night, that was the biggest thing that was brought to my attention, was when you girls wash your face every night, you're inevitably going to get water all around your hairline. So that's going to instantly make that part of the blowout get curlier faster or become unrulier faster. So if you target that and make sure to really dry, pull, stretch, style, manipulate that hair around your hairline and your calyx right away, like post-shower, post-haste, it'll inevitably make you, your restyling and your resculpting better, like for day 2 for touch-ups, basically. So if you're gonna be touching up your hair and your hairline, you wanna be able to manipulate that better. Yeah, and then I guess like to end this podcast would be to talk about the ends of your hair. And when you're blowing out your hair, my final little tip is when you're using your brush on your ends, and this should be the final thing you do, is you want to make sure you seal your ends. And as I seal this episode that went all over the place, using the blow dryer and making sure that you're always using the air from root to end. So the blow dryer should always be root to end. So that can be taken in 2 different ways, because if you flip your head over, the direction of the air is going to be different than if you're standing normal, because like your hair is flipped upside down, so you have to manipulate the blow dryer in an upside down fashion. Does that make sense? So as you're blow drying your hair, the very, very bottom section of it and your ends, you should really take the blow dryer and think of your little round brush as like a roller with a handle, and you want to spin the hell out of that and seal your ends. Because if you don't seal your ends, that's when you start getting splits, and that's also going to cause the most damage and the most breakage, because the ends are your most like they're the like, well, what am I trying to say? Your ends are, oh, I'm still thinking about my daughter taking a shit in my hand. Your ends are your most fragile, obviously. They are the most fragile part of your hair, so you have to take care of them the most. So as you spin and manipulate and seal those down, they're gonna be able to, A, not get snagged as much when you get tangles because they're sealed. B, when you're, you don't have to put as much heat on them when you're retouching. So, you know, day 2, day 3, day 4, when you're trying to prolong your blowout, make your blowout last longer, you won't have to worry about it because they'll be sealed. And, you know, try not to do so much alcohol hairspray on the ends if you can, because the more sticky stuff you put on the ends, just the more tangled, unruly, and unwilling they become to kind of mold to the way you want them. And you want your hair moving, and you want it beautiful. You want it swaying. You know, you want beautiful, like bouncy, touchable hair. You don't want stiff, crunchy, gross hair, which is usually what happens when you try to cut corners on your blowouts, and you're trying to mask problems with too much hairspray or too much heat, and you're trying to, you know, you're trying to just make a, you know, you're trying to polish a turd, as I come back to that. But hey, today's topic is blowout. So what did we hit today? We hit hopefully some blowout knowledge that will help you actually style your hair. Dads at home, you learned what a blowout was in the diaper realm. You learned a little bit about, I guess, my history and how I became a hairdresser when I flipped my car in a blowout car accident. And, oh, you learned how to hopefully prevent big, bad conversations with your wife when you have a blowout argument over a Brita water filter. So, yeah, this was my first podcast, guys, and I hope it was entertaining. I hope you learned something from it. And I hope in the future episodes to have a guest with me. I'm sure I'll have Laura on here a lot. Hopefully when Phoenix starts talking more, I'll get her on here more. And I really want to get a lot of my hairdresser counterpart, my really good friends from the industry, to come on and talk about, you know, certain things that they've learned. And I really just want this to be a fun place that I can talk hair, talk stuff about fatherhood, talk about all of my things that I'm going through, good and bad, and hopefully share a lot of my experience, you know, in my hair world. And hopefully I can strengthen your guys' hair game as well. And you can listen to this and have a good time and learn a couple things from it. And yeah, and I just hope that I can become a better father, better hairdresser, and just a better overall person. Try to be funny, you know. And yeah, so episode 1 might have crashed and burned. It might have been a blowout on its own, but you know, I did it. I had to. You got to start somewhere, right? So anyway, for those of you, I also do some stuff on YouTube. I try to do tutorials and fun behind the scenes things of photo shoots that I'm on. And I'm gonna try to create a lot more content there for you guys. You can follow me on Instagram at Matt's Hair. But I think that's gonna be it for me today. I wanna get back to playing with my daughter. And anyway, I hope you all have an amazing, amazing day, and I hope you have a dad hair day. Remember, this is the only place you wanna get your hair matted, and I am signing off. Have an awesome, awesome day. Thank you for listening. Okay. How did I go talking about a bunch of, I think I talked about my daughter shooting my